life after death, but he's an extremely well-qualified man on this side of the grave anyway, and he's got some very interesting evidence. I don't know what he's going to talk to you or how he's going to present it tonight, but I have heard his ideas on this topic, and I think it'll bring you to some sobering thoughts and some very interesting conclusions of how you're going to conduct yourself on this side of the grave when you consider what might happen to you in the hereafter. So with that, I'd really like you to welcome and to be enchanted and enjoy the evening with Jan Merta, who is one of the most best qualified speakers that you'll be lucky enough to hear. Okay, thank you, bye-bye.
Well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
There's quite a few new faces here, you know. I just wonder, who is here first time? Can you just put up your hand? Wow. Well, normally, you know, I tend to always say something which I have not mentioned before, but since there's quite a few new people, for their benefits and for refresher for those who already heard some of the things, I would stress certain things again. The topic I'd like to talk about today, as usual, is, to me, very interesting one. Actually, of all the subjects I've been talking about and studying, the survival is probably the one I spend the most time on, the one I really enjoy, and the one I've been involved nearly 40 years, and the last 20, I would say, it's my primary interest. So over the years, I put together some picture, and I got some ideas and got some convictions. Some people believe that we live after we die, and some people don't. Now, I don't want to talk to you in a way that I would try to convince you either way. All what I try to do is to express my view and give you some directions if you are interested more about the subject, and then you can just follow it up. Nobody can convince anybody. Everybody has to convince oneself. I can give you all kind of facts, but until you do your own studies, until you do your own investigation or homework, be just words to many of you. At certain times, you know, I believed. And then, obviously, belief is a certain uncertainty. You are not in a possession of the facts, but you have a certain opinions. You formulated your ones, and you believe, but belief can be changed. Today I believe, and tomorrow somebody comes with some other evidence, and I might change my mind. Well, I do not believe in survival. I know that it is a fact. It's my personal statement, and it frees me from additional speculations. All what I do is trying to gather more and more evidence and to learn from all this for my own benefits, because we live by the principles, by our beliefs. If we believe something, we try to live accordingly. And it's a very important thing, you know, to decide within you as to which direction in life you would take. Now, issue of survival, do we live after we die? is a long one. From time immemorial, people rack their brains on this question. They philosophized, and when the religion came, religion also proclaimed a survival. It might vary, depending on the time of religion, but every religion in some ways speaks about man's survival, speaks about us being immortal being, albeit sometimes very restricted in a way we would be on either side. Nonetheless, it still is giving us certain information about life after death. One of the, obviously, we can say we are Christian, you have a Bible, and if you have Muslim, you have a Quran, and Hinduism, they have their Vedas and Upanishads, you know. Every major religion has their own scriptures and see the survival in a certain way. The fact of communication with those who parted has been known and is in recorded history, go back thousands of years. In old Greece, they used to have these oracles, you know, they had a special place, psychomantium, or whatever they call it. And the very sensitive individuals, usually women, would be there as a priestess, and they would prophesy, they would contact sometimes those who passed and act as an intermediary. So it's not something which has become this famous knocking in 1848 in States, knock or whatever, the two sisters heard it and communicated with this knocking and eventually discovered that this knocking was very intelligent, tried to answer certain questions when they asked, yes, you know, give us a knock, if no, give us two. And soon they started to communicate, and eventually through this type of tapping noise, they established a contact with somebody who claimed that he lived in their house and that he was killed and was buried in the grounds of that property. And that's supposed to have happened over 50 years prior to this communication. So they did actually search, and they found the remains of the bones and all. So that started a really heavy interest in so-called research into the possibility of survival. Curiosity spread very fast, and from the United States, where it all started, it just jumped across the pond, and suddenly England and Germany and France, most of the Europe, western part of the Europe, started to double in these so-called communications. Now, what I'm trying to say is that when I say communications, I mean communication with those who died, rather as opposed to, let's say, channeling, which is also a sort of across-the-board communication by person from here, but some entity from other so-called other side, which might not necessarily be a deceased person. It can be an entity which have never lived on this earth, might be an entity which is sort of different origin than humans, nonetheless intelligent and capable of communicating and proving evidence of its own existence. Well, it is a very difficult topic to study. First, there is a tremendous prejudice against anybody who decides to do research. He is scoffed at, you know, he's handicapped in a way of getting, let's say, certain tenures or promotion within academic circles. He is basically a joke to anybody who wants to make joke of him, and there is a little he can do about it. So when you look into the history of this research, which really started in the last part of 19th century and continued until probably mid-50s of last century. I mean, I'm not saying it's not continuing, but there is a great difference in how the research is being carried out and what is being researched. But this classical research, which try to provide evidential for survival of a soul and our continuity, has been carried at that time by very prominent people, people of science, people of highest integrity and learning. The names which are associated with Nobel Prize winners, great discoveries in natural sciences, philosophers, writers, politicians, not only from Europe, but from here and other parts of the world. If you really are interested about these details, you can go into any library and pull a basic book on research in this area, whether it's some sort of a popular or more in-depth writing or encyclopedia, and you would find that there were many, many prominent people. And we cannot disregard their opinions. We cannot disregard simply what they have said and what they claim they have found. But somehow this happens, you know. These people, doesn't matter how high integrity and standing might have, the moment they start to say, yeah, there is a survival evidence, people start laughing. And the point is they don't do anything to research with the same intensity and with the same depth as those people did it. So I'm trying to say that in the past, in some ways, I find it was easier to research in these fields than it is today. I think it is because of the prevalent belief in materialistic way of existence. I think that there are connections which are based on acceptance of theory of evolution, which deny any other lives than the life we live now, which robs us of our souls, which only claim that we are just a bunch of cells, and our thoughts are nothing else than biochemical processes. And when we live our meaningless short life in the infinity of universe or space, we just become a manura, ashes to ashes and dust to dust, and become a part of cosmic debris, and maybe one of these days again somehow this ash become useful fertilizer and something grows out of it. So depending how you see it, you know, in order for me to research into area of these so-called ignored fields of research, I had to study traditional fields. So in order for me to understand, I had to fortify myself with traditional knowledge. So I went and got a doctorate in psychology from prestigious university. I got a degree of science from McDougall University. I studied physiology at master's level. So I was learning about body. I was learning about the mind as we understand it. So the fact that I have continued further research only indicates that I wasn't satisfied with the explanation offered by these 2 or 3 scientists I have mentioned. Well, I went further and I studied paranormal. Since I was a young person, I was interested about these phenomena, which are part of the global so-called ESP range, which includes also, in some way, survival of one's existence. And I've done quite a breakthrough in these fields. I was lecturing on parapsychology at adult education programs in Montreal, first time in history of Canada. 1972, I had my own program, first time ever given at that time. And I had to go through my trials and tribulations, being attacked by everybody inside who didn't believe in these things. A priori skeptics got a one page in a major newspapers in Montreal to defend me, and I couldn't get even one line to defend myself. Eventually, I had a public debate. Over 400 people came to listen to me and my opponents to defend the rights to speak on these subjects. And even I was much more convincing than the magician who challenged me and some other skeptics. Media, obviously, were not very happy with the verdict of the audience and mentioned very little about it. So I know what it means to be pioneer in a certain field. If that happened to me 100 years ago, I would be probably burned as a heretic, as a witch or something similar. That way I only got, as we say, taste of my own medicine. And it led me to withdraw from further research officially. I have never ever gave any public lecture, joined any society, nor contributed to any publication on any subject of ESP. And the only thing I do is because of my friend Neil. From time to time I come, I speak to the people like you on invitation only, without any promotion, anything, because I don't want in any way to get myself again involved in situations, then instead of having time for myself and studying what I like, to be bothered and defending myself against people who know nothing about a subject. So when I'm talking about life after the survival, it is not a topic which just sort of popped to my head as oh, it's a good idea to talk about it. I take it very seriously. I have invested lots of time and effort, and time never comes back. Once you lose it, it's gone. And as you get older, time becomes precious, and you cannot fool around and blow it away as when you've been 20 or something. So since I'm still continuing, and my intensity of interest is increasing rather than decreasing, it is an indication that there is a lot of good stuff and lots of good solid evidence which only support the evidence already available and piles up overwhelming probability that we do exist after we die. Now, I have limited time of 2 hours or so to speak on that topic, which I can speak on probably 20, 30 hours without really getting too much sweat. And I have lots of material, not only in the books and other documentations, which would fill anybody's library. I don't think anybody can get close to my book on that subject. But I have also videotapes and recordings, and I have seen and I have heard over the years. So what I'm trying to talk to you about is something which is very close to me. You have people who want to know something about, who are interested. And then you have people who are involved in something. And there is a big difference between being interested about something and being involved in something. Chicken might be interested what would happen to her egg, but a pig is definitely interested what would happen to him if you have a bacon and eggs for breakfast. So there is a real difference, and I say I am is definitely involved. What I wanted to say, pig is definitely involved, and I'm involved because when I'm saying certain things, I feel the responsibility for the information I'm trying to convey. I just hope that those who are interested would go and look for further evidence and satisfy their own curiosity either way. But from my point of view, it's very simple. Whether you believe or not believe, that what is true is true. And to me, survival is true. So maybe one day we all would meet somewhere, those who believed and those who didn't. Now, if we go for a trip, wherever we go for a trip, in order to enjoy that trip, we try to get as much information about the place we are going to as we can beforehand. So we are not lost. We can benefit from. We're trying to prepare ourselves as best as we can. We try to even learn some words of foreign language. If we go to a foreign country, we check on the habits, kitchen, whatever, dress. And it's wise, because that way we would get less surprise, and being more prepared and better prepared, we would get more out of that trip than we would have otherwise. Well, to me, passing on the other side is a sort of a journey. Journey which is truly an eternal journey. Journey which, whether you like it or no, you would very soon undertake. And therefore, it's pretty good to be prepared, to be aware what one would be facing when one goes on the other side, and what to learn, what to do to oneself on one's character and other level of personality, so we can benefit, rather than to, in a way, hang around for God knows how long before somehow it dawned on us that, yeah, there is no way back and we have to move. So, since I said I believed in, not believe, I know there is a survival, I'm convinced about it, lots of good things happen to when you are sure about certain things. Now, one can say, well, maybe he's mistaken. From your point of view, it's a good point. From my point, it means nothing. Because if I'm mistaken, and I die, and there is no survival, I would not know I was mistaken. On the other hand, if I am right, and I survive on the other side, which I believe I would, then I would say, thanks God, I knew it before I went, so I have been more prepared. So there is no loss in this sort of attitude. It'd be worse if I have not believed, and then I found myself on the other side, and I discovered I was really mistaken, because that's, you would know. You see, my mistake would not be known, but yours who don't believe would, from my point of view. So let's start. The first evidence, which I would say was more concise and more impressive, was the evidence which came in 17th century. And that was in a writing of a Swedish scientist, Emanuel Swedenborg. Swedenborg was considered a polymath, the term which means the guy who knows sort of everything, you know. He just mastered all the sciences of his time. And he wrote scientific books on nature, on physiology. He had major discoveries in medicine and economy. He was just an artist, and just mention, he was the guy who was a giant. And the whole world of that time was looking towards him as a representative of the highest in humanity. He was a humanitarian, and they compare him with Leonardo da Vinci, you know. There are tons of books written about him. If you go into the famous people who influenced, it's endless, from the famous philosophers, politicians, and just virtually anybody who was somebody in 17, 18, 19, and even in 20th century. Well, what happened? This particular scientist, Emanuel Swedenborg, was a well-known botanist and physiologist who discovered certain parts in the body, the eyes of pancreas, and circulate. He talked about certain part of brain, you know, he divided brain in some parts, you know, very similar to the modern understanding of brain. But point is, he was looking for a soul. He was a son of the Swedish minister, and he was brought up in a church. But being a scientist, he sort of adopted this philosophy of, you know, je suis, je pense, or je pense, je suis. And he believed that I think I am, and the belief in a soul wasn't necessarily something well defined, and so he tried to look for it. And he dissected animals, and he dissected sort of, he was one of the first anatomists. He looked for a soul in a body, and he couldn't find it. He just couldn't find a soul. Then something happened to him when he was 56 years old, which was a complete illumination from a guy who was an eminent scientist who covered all the field known to mankind at that time, including mathematics and everything. He got enlightened. He felt in his writings that, you know, God spoke to him. And he started to communicate with words of spirit. Something happened to him in his age of 56, and he started to communicate with word of spirit. And he was in that world of spirit day and night. It was not just some daydream which would come and never repeat itself. Every day he was in communication with the spirits until he died, 26 years later. And during this time, he became a very prolific writer on theology. He wrote tremendous number of books on the theme of religion, especially related to Bible, but also on life after death. And they were so impressive that lots of people started to follow his beliefs, and eventually they formed the church in 18th century. Actually, in the 19th century, that was in the 19th century. And this church is still existing today, General Church of New Jerusalem. There are theological schools and all over. And they have thousands and thousands of followers. And one basic principle is life after death. They're showing very clearly, based on Swedenborg's observation, how it happens that soul departs the body and how the soul lives on the other side. And that was written in 18th century, and it's still today very popular explanation and the most comprehensive explanation of life after death. But he was the first. Then when this all spiritualism started, and there was evidence coming out that some knockings and rappings, you know, are corresponding to the intelligent entities, people started to communicate and set up their own little home circles. And that sort of started a movement called spiritualism. And spiritualism is really international movement. And there are hundreds of thousands of people who've been exposed to this philosophy that we never die. And some eminent scientists started to really take it very seriously and done tremendous research. And their books, which are classics today, are virtually impossible to get. You have to really go into library probably and do a tremendous interlibrary borrowing to find a copy, for example, in Canada. But they provided to me absolutely convincing evidence of survival. So when I started to read these things, I had a good start. I didn't need to sort of do all this work these people already did. I could just build on what already existed. And being trained, I was able to see clearly what areas might be sort of best to look into. And because I've had some experiences myself, I didn't need to convince myself of the reality. I was able to build on that conviction. And research into this area of survival has many facets. You know, we can say there is mediumship. Medium is basically a person who acts as a link between those who are alive and those who are parted. And medium does not try to bring in own opinions or convictions or anything. It's just a sort of like a speaker and a microphone at the same time, because through medium you can pass the messages back and forth. And when the medium does it, medium most of the time does it in a trance. And trance means a state of existence where the consciousness of the individual is suspended. Medium is not even aware what medium is saying, and very frequently is quite surprised what came out of the medium, because medium usually, in the past especially, was just an ordinary, very poorly or virtually non-educated individual. But the wisdom sometimes coming through the lips of that medium impressed even the most scholarly minds, you know, not only in a depth and a scope, but sometimes it came in languages which that person have never heard of. And sometimes it came in languages which nobody could understood, because it was a very ancient, extinct language, and only experts, you know, maybe a handful of them on this planet would be able to confirm. Certain communications were so amazingly reflecting the time the spirit claim lived, that archaic terminologies, words and everything, which normally are not anymore in use, would be frequently mentioned and verified. So that's sort of a trance. But medium also, it was clairvoyant medium could not only sort of hear what is being said from other side, but actually can see. So there are mediums who not only can hear, called Claudian medium, but also can see the deceased person. So it was able to describe its utmost accuracy, the person who claimed to be so-and-so, to those who've been still alive. So they could really verify it very frequently. Sometimes they would be describing a person. People present could not remember knowing, but when they mentioned it further, it was clear that it was somebody, when they mentioned it, to recognize that person and all. So these are other evidences. Then the other evidence for survival came through automatic writing. The medium would take a pen and would just write without looking on what is writing. And then when it is decoded, you know, you discover it's utterly brilliant and evidential. One of the first recorded automatic writings I came across actually was done in a circle with a famous French writer, Victor Hugo, who really was part of the circle. And he lived on an island at a certain point of his life. There was virtually nobody there, so they spent their time sitting around and trying to communicate, and what he brought from that is utterly impressive. I think his book is called Whispers from Eternity, and it's a totally forgotten masterpiece which only recently been republished about 15 years ago. I think you can get it in a library if you look for it. But these are beautiful writing, so sincere and so deep and so beautiful that really you start to wonder right from that writing what's going on. And he was just the first one. There are hundreds and thousands of books on this topic in virtually every major language. Well, these are sort of one of the manifestations of survival. Other, which has been well researched, is actually photographs of people who died. And these photographs have been, especially in the last century, taken by many people. I think that today it's very difficult to do this because our photographic emulsion might be different, and the speed of the pictures and all this modern technology might not be conducive. But these photographic plates, black and white, you know, plates developed singly in the bath, are the most impressive documentations of survival. I've been comparing some of these pictures, you know, taken by different photographers in different times of the same person, which appear repeatedly, and it's utterly uncanny when you compare the similarities of these faces. We have a Conan Doyle, it's a Conan Doyle, whether it's taken today or right after he passed out or in Germany or somewhere. It's just an amazing stuff. So this was other thing which lots of research been carried out on. This is part of evidence for survival. Other area which is very impressive would be direct voice. Direct voice to me is the most impressive evidence of communication due to the fact that a medium usually is only used as an instrument and it doesn't speak, and the voice which comes in a room is not necessarily coming from the medium. This voice would be positioned at any part of the room. Sometimes it's coming from a corner of the room. Very frequently these voices tend to come from a corners, but they can also boom through the whole room, and you won't be able to locate specifically where is it coming from. But what is beautiful about this direct voice is that it's like we're talking now. You can talk to the deceased or to the spirit or entity, questions and answers straight, not via medium, and answers will be coming in a voice, very likely in a voice which is precisely the voice you remembered of those who died. So if it is your friend and you knew how he sounded, that's how you would sound. If it is female voice of somebody, it would be a female voice. Change into a child's voice, man's voice, whatever, different. So it's not the same voice coming out for everybody. It's for each individual person, that particular voice. And they are crisp, clear. There's no question about it. They are so recognizable that when you analyze the voice before and after, and that was done, it's superimposed. You know, now this is done by the group of spirits usually who try to assist the spirit who will be speaking through a voice box. Voice box is a creation from special energy in a body, which researchers in this field call ectoplasm or teleplasm. And this is a special type of material which can be then very, I guess from their side, very easily modified, so they create the actual larynx and the whole voice cord and everything, so the spirit can use it and speak through it. And the other very strong area, which today is totally unheard of or is just totally forgotten, is area of physical manifestation. That means that actually the spirits try to appear in front of the sitter in a shape and form exactly how he looked when he was alive. Sometimes it happens very easy, and you can have not only one, but 2 or 3 different entities right in front of you, which might be the family members or friends or strangers. Always somebody in a circle would recognize them. Sometimes it would be only part, they call it simulacrum, you know, a certain part, let's say hand would appear, and partially materialized body. But when these bodies are perfect, they are perfect. And testimonies, eminent professors like Professor Richard from France, who won Nobel Prize for Physiology, and he wrote that thick book about evidence for survival. Or Sir William Crookes, you know, who invented discovery of helium and Crook tube and all kind of stuff in chemistry. They examined some of these mediums in the presence of very eminent doctors, and they discovered that that entity would have body temperature and pulse and all the organs in place as it should, and there'd be nothing different. I know some of these cases from my own experience that materialization, when it's good, is as good as we are now. But it usually doesn't last long and can dissipate in front of your eyes, you know, just like that. So materialism or physical manifestation is extremely well documented and proven. There are hundreds of books really on this topic. Some of them are very, very technical and scientific. one of the best researchers, at par with all these names I mentioned before, the Crooks, Meyers, Conradole, W.T. Steed and all, is actually a Canadian guy from Winnipeg. He was an eminent medical doctor in Winnipeg. First president of Canadian Medical Association. Chief surgeon in some of the hospitals and a professor at Winnipeg University. Very big name in medicine. And this guy, very skeptical to start with, stumbled on the so-called phenomena of survival. By chance, he was trying to study effect of psychokinesis. Is psychokinesis real or not? And as he was doing this research, he slowly but surely started to come across an evidence which led him deeper and deeper to probe. And eventually, thanks God, he had a bunch of good mediums in his household. He was able to have a circle which lasted for quite a few years. And his work, which he did, is considered one of the best evidence of survival. Without question, he is one of the great pioneers. He died in 1935, and there is a book called Intention and Survival, written by him, Dr. W.G. Glenn Hamilton. And then there is another book which was written by his daughter after he died, which builds up on other documentations he had no chance to publish before he died. And it's called Survival a Fact. Both these books you can still get as second-hand books sometimes. I'm sure that any good library could have a copy. And really, that first is Survival a Fact itself is worth any penny, because it has over 60 plates showing various stages of materialization and ectoplasm and psychic pictures. It's just a great book, you know. Well, the research continued mostly through these type of sittings. People would be investigated by these different scientists very frequently, and the records would be kept usually by stenographer. In a time which were much more simple, there was no tape recording, there were no really good type of cameras to capture some of the things, no videos, nothing. So the records we have is purely based on a record of observations and accounts of what really happened. Very frequently we have these reports notarized, and all the sitters present would sign and verify that that's what happened. It's a very impressive stuff. Well, as I've said, as the Darwinian theory of evolution whole plays in our educational system after the Skokie trial in 1923 and all, when a sort of so-called creationism and all was thrown out and we all had to learn evolution, the whole idea of survival dissipated from people's mind. And so the research was really virtually non-existent. No more records of good sittings, good seances. There are some records done from other countries. Greece, they had some good mediums, there's a bunch of books. But most of these things are very subjective, you know, medium and few people who wrote a book about it. But actual laboratory research or truly objective research, very little has been done until about late 60s and early 70s. There was this Swedish filmmaker. His name was Jürgensen. And he, for his film, wanted to record sound of the birds, you know, in some quiet place. So he took his tape recorder and took it into a cemetery and tried to record sound of birds. And when he played it back, he was amazed that there were some voices. So he tried to analyze these voices, and he soon realized that these voices had a meaning. They called themselves certain names, left their messages, and tried to indicate that they exist without the bodies. So he started to dedicate most of his life to this recording of voices. And he made quite an impression because that was objective evidence. He gave you the tape, you can listen and you can hear for yourself. And it came as far as he got audience with the Pope of that time. I don't know which one was that one, Pius 23rd or something. And he got even decoration for his contribution to this issue of survival from Roman Catholic hierarchy. So that's a pretty strong statement, which really indicates that instead of throwing him out, they actually gave him credit for his effort. And this led other people to imitate these recordings. One of the most impressive one came from a guy who was a German. Oh no, he was not a German. He was a Lithuanian by origin, but somehow he also speak fluent German, and he was a linguist, and he spoke about other 6 or 7 languages fluently. So he heard about this Jorgensen, and he said, well, I should probably try it myself. So he got his tape recorder, but he have modified it. He done to it, you know, all kind of attunement, so he increased the sensitivity for certain frequencies, and he started to record incredible recordings of these voices. He recorded so many of them that people couldn't laugh anymore. They truly had to accept that what is there is very impressive. And it came from people who died, and in so many languages which you could understand, so you can interpret it. That there were these guys in Britain from one of the magazines and tried to poke fun of him. So they went to see him, and they thought that they would write something funny about this research he is doing and make fun out of it. But when they actually heard what was there and evidence was undeniable, they got really impressed, and they wrote a very, very good article. And that was one of the first major breakthroughs for research in this area. And they started to call it EVP, electronic voice phenomena. And society has been created in different countries. One of the very large one was United States and Europe, Germany, France, everywhere. And this EVP started to spread. And other people started to record and getting these voices. I have at least 2 or 3 cassettes at home I got from different groups of these voices. They call it whispers, again, from eternity. And you can play it to yourself and you'll be impressed, some of the voices, how clear they are and evidential. Usually what they do is they just leave the tape recorder running, and when they play it back, you know, just new tapes, you buy them from, it's an old protocol. It's not just people are fooling with it. They try to be very careful. They are scientists, some of them. Well, this Konstantin Raudiv wrote a book, which is called Breakthrough. And this is the classic in the area of research for survival. It not only brings the whole history up to date, what has been done in that field of AVP up to his time, but actually put a circuitry and everything he used for his machine so other people can build it. And that really was an incredible breakthrough which deviated from mediumship, because mediumship was always something people felt, well, you know, we cannot trust this medium. He is a cheater. And they tried to prevent this medium. The torture this medium had to go through sometimes in order to satisfy the so-called conditions and criteria laid down usually by magicians and utter skeptics is totally heartbreaking what they had to do, from being stripped naked and searched to being sewn into the sacks, and you just have no idea. And so this electronic recording really was a boon. Tesla was interested in it, Edison was interested in it, you know. There is enough evidence that Einstein was very much interested about this type of research and had a correspondent actually with researchers in a field of psychic phenomena on this topic. But nobody built it until Konstantin Raudiv came and he built this device. Well, there was a guy in the United States at that time, his name was George Meek. And George Meek was a clever electrician, he was a professional engineer. And he had a number of very lucrative patents when he was young. And that generated enough income for him that he not only could dedicate himself to research in these areas of survival and to fund the researchers, but he established a society which he called Meta Science Society. And that was done sometimes in late 70s. I used to communicate with George Meek, and he passed out now, so I hope to communicate with him one of these days. But he had built a device which was much more sophisticated than the one Konstantin Rauda built. And his device was called Spiricom. And a Spiricom was actually a telephone for a spirit. You could actually speak to the guy from the other side in a real time, like on a telephone, through this device. It was built by his assistant. His name was O'Neill, Bob O'Neill. Simple guy, technician by training, radar operator during Second World War. And he was able to build it, but not because he got the idea, but the spirits. One of them was Dr. Mueller. Dr. Mueller was a professor of electronic engineering who died in 1969. And he as a spirit came through this device, which was in its most primitive shape at the time, and actually told O'Neill what to do to improve it so it becomes a reliable and effective device. And you can actually hear on these tapes how he's telling me, go and you need certain bridge and transistor number and everything else, and he would just technically advise him how to improve it. And this Dr. Mueller, nobody knew of, provide the most evidential about himself, including his unlisted telephone number, name of his secretary who worked for him, and information she could easily verify. And then he said, I wrote a book, and he mentioned title about, and they couldn't find it. They verified everything except they couldn't find that book. So through the Spiricom, they asked him, well, where is your book? We can't find it. And you can all hear, because it was all recorded. He says, well, my book is in such and such a university's library, and he mentioned everything, and they went there and pulled it out from a shelf. So this Spiricom was a major breakthrough. And there is a book written by a chap called, I'll give you the name of it, Fuller, the guy who wrote Ghost of Flight 403 and some other stuffs. And Fuller wrote a book called Ghost of Megacycle 29. Megacycle, it's a term, and a Megacycle 29 is the type of megacycle, which was the megacycle they needed to play as a background noise in order that these communications can be established, because spirit doesn't have its own voice, but a spirit has a power to modify existing sound. So you play a certain tune, and it's like a bit frequency. As you insert into it, the tune changes, so, and that would turn into the word. So anyway, point is that with this Spiricom device, they could communicate straight with people who died, and this device would be working even if the operator was not present, so you can actually hear sometimes spirit calling, William, where are you? And the guy is not in the machine. And anyway, because of that overwhelming evidence that communication with disease is possible, George Meek called a conference in Washington, D.C. in late 80s. And he have printed very impressive evidence of this research, including videotape of the process and providing, audio recordings and everything. And he sent a letter to all the world newspaper organizations and media organizations he can put hands on, inviting them to this unveiling of a breakthrough in communications between those who are living and those who are dead. He thought that this type of evidence would stand any scrutiny because he have produced blueprints and everything for anybody to build his own Spiricom machine. He had eminent speakers to backing him up that evening, you know, the scientists and co-workers and really big names, not just some friends, but really well-known PhDs, MDs, and eminent people. I have a videotape of that conference. I'm not kidding. There was no more than 7 newspaper men or journalists who came to listen. So as you can see that there is definitely, it's a hard thing to let people know new breakthrough, new ideas, especially radical ones like that, just don't come easy, it doesn't cut. But because of the Spiricom research and a book which was published about it and translated to other languages, some people in Europe read it and decided to build it. And there were some clever engineers. There was one engineer, I think his name was Ernst Schneider, and this guy was a retired electrical engineer. And he, no, I read his book, you know, and the book is again confirming everything what I knew and came across, and added, unfortunately, the same story. He had a bunch of friends, and these friends have been meeting together for maybe 30 years in his house. They would play cards, you know, and drink a beer and have fun. So they were solid, so-called solid friends. So when this Schreiber read about the Spiricom, and during the playing cards they talked on all kind of topics, he says, well, you know, it's no big deal to build it, you know. I can do it in the afternoon or something. So the friend said, yeah, I'll do it, you know, you are a good engineer, you just can, no big deal. So he did and built it and played with it, and it worked beautifully. So he told that to his friends. And that was the last time he saw his friends. Never came back, you know. So you can see clearly that sometimes people are full of being, as we say, until the reality hits them. So we can challenge unknown until the unknown challenges us, you know, and then it's a different ball game. So anyway, so this guy Schreiber started to work on the Spiricom and was getting quite impressive results. So he decided, well, perhaps I can improve upon. So he fiddled with his gear and everything else, and soon he was able to get the pictures of those who died on television. So not only he could record their voices, but actually he can record them on a videotape. And so he called his device Videocom. And Videocom was built, and he started to produce these pictures. Just, my God, you know, one after the other. Some very famous names appear on television screens. And you can see it's them. But they are sort of recognizable instantly, but never earthly picture was taken like that of them. You might have children who died, and now in spirit they grew up and are older. So you can see the older picture of the child, which is adolescent or adult, but still recognizable. Not only that, the Videocom had a capability of not only taking the person on a video and seeing it on a television screen, but that person speak directly, which you can then record as a voice. So you have a combination of instant communication with the record of that person communicating. I have seen a record which lasted 132 seconds of a communication using Videocom recording, and that was shown on a conferences, you know, United States, which deal with paranormal and all that, where Konstantin Raudaev, the man who wrote Breakthrough, died. And his funeral is being carried on, and he speaks to a friend of mine, Walter Upov. And Konstantin Raudaev is saying to him, right facing him from the television, Walter, Walter, isn't it funny? They are burying me there, and I'm just talking to you here, you know, just saying, you know, that, you know, he is not there at all, but he's alive. And so this type of research attracted attention of other groups. And one of them, as a result of this work on Videocom and on Spiricom, was put together in Luxembourg. Hans and Marie Herschbach were simple people, teachers by profession she was, and I don't know what I was doing, but they've been retired, and they started to sort of follow their advice But instead of using video as a videocom only, they started to see whether they can use computers. And so they would switch that computer on, and by sort of having certain lineups with sensitive people and all, messages started to come through computers. On its own, computer would spit out quite a treatise on all kinds of subjects which related to the individuals who either died, some of them a very famous name, and not only that, the pictures would appear on a computer. Pictures of people, how they look on the other side. The picture of the environment which surrounds them, just beyond belief. And that was a beginning of this new association which spread, got lots of publicity in Europe, spread all over the world, and it's called Trans-International Communication Society. And there are members from Brazil and everywhere. And these people were producing incredible evidence of survival, which in some ways was much more objective than, for example, mediumships and all, because these messages were coming through computers, and both the pictures and a text. The entities which were coming through were wide and broad, both in a time they've been born, going back hundreds of years, to an entities which have never been actually in a human bodies and just existed on other side or come from other planets. And this association had their own magazine, they published regularly, and they showed their pictures. Even the color, the first picture in color of a deceased person was a famous actor, Rudi Schneider. And it's absolutely amazing how sharp and how clear is that picture. Again, it's the picture of an individual who was well known as a famous actress. And there's lots of pictures of her, but never the one which appeared on the television. The history of that whole movement is in a book which just came out not long ago, and it's called Miracles in the Storm. And it's talking to the other side with the new technology of spiritual contact. And this is a best summary of all the latest scientific research in area of trying to communicate with people who died via, technology rather than via mediumship. So the research changed from the traditional research which focused on mediumship and small home circles, with very little evidence or documentations except what was written, to a modern research which tried to shy away from subjective mediumship and try to focus on areas which are more objective and can work even if nobody is there. The intricacy of these communications and confirmation of a spirit communications are beyond belief. They would have, let's say, a group in Germany, and a group in the United States, and a group, let's say, in New Zealand. And the spirit would spread the message into 3 different stations. So he would say something, part of it in Britain, part of it in States, and when you put it together, it's one solid document. It was designed to prove, and when you read these things, you really would have to think very hard to disregard this evidence. So anyway, that's how, again, the association have disintegrated recently, but individuals are still doing their own research. The reason why it disintegrated is that as they started to be good, they expanded and they brought in new people. And new people sometimes were not the best. The harmony was disrupted. The egos and sort of devious attitudes, introduced into the whole thing until they have lost that touch with the other side. And they warned them, they said, without harmony we cannot communicate. This is the ground for establishing that frequency which resonates. So you get too many lawyers in their organization who try to sort of run the show, and that's, when you read it you would understand it. Anyway, so at present we have lots of evidence available. I don't know of anybody doing certain meaningful research even if there are some books coming out, the latest one came last year, and it's by the eminent psychologist from States. I forgot his name, but he done lots of research with mediums, like the guy, von Prague, and the other television mediums, Anderson, whatever his name is, and some others. And they put them into all kind of EEG instruments and monitoring, and they were able to show that definitely there are some brain waves and things which are alien to these people, and that there is a communication from so-called other side. They were not, like as firm as some of these researchers, but undeniably they provided a strong evidence that possibility of life after that exists. So there is quite a bit of it, from the whole scale, from the very basic, observations and recording the observations, to effort to sort of do a little bit more scientific research by testing the mediums, providing the special sessions where the spirit would be tested, and all to the modern research which started with sort of recording of voices and then getting pictures and then using computers and building technology which basically tried to put a bridge. I don't want to elaborate on this particular topic much more. I think I gave you a broad overview as to how the scientific world attacked this problem of survival. Obviously religions, they have their own view, and they don't do research, they know and they believe. So basically millions and billions of people believe in survival simply by being follower of certain religions which believes in it. And there are lots of other people who believe in it because of other personal experiences, or basically having evidence of that survival through the available documentations. And also it's not something which is alien, it's just that somehow it never got the attention it should. And it's pity, because we all have to go one day, and as I've said, it is very important what you know. Well, many, many years ago, I just want to cheer you up a little bit, I came across a very unusual group. Through a friend of mine, he told me very secretly what I've been doing, and at that time I had no idea that that type of things was happening. They started in 1967, 1968, and when he told me about, it was probably 1974, 75. So they've been in it for a while. It was a group of them, bunch of them. And they started to have this communication. They had a circle, and they started to communicate. Now, my friend was a very unusual mind, He was a very simple fellow, but he was a farmer. And he had this really good, solid farmer's mind, prove it to me, I'm from Missouri, that stuff. But at the same time, he could see things differently. So he told me how they started. He said, well, he knew nothing about it, but he read Bible, and he said, well, in the Bible they say, if you come to the Lord as a little children, and you just ask, just knock on the door, Lord would open, and you can come to him, and he would let you know himself. So he said, well, I had his siblings, remember that. He said, I had his siblings, and some of them were, actually they were his children, and there were also his brother involved, but he was much younger, and anyway, he said, well, let's say that this is true, that if you knock, the door would be open. If you are simple and you come to him as a little child, see what happens. So he says, I call all these little ones together. The youngest was 6 years old, and the oldest at that time was about 12. So it was a range between 6 and 12. And he says, let's play a game, he said to me. I asked him, I said, how did you sort of got that idea? Because, channeling coming from adults is quite accepted, There's lots of books on it, and we all heard about channelers and all that stuff, Ramtha, God knows what. But little children, that really grabbed my attention. I said, well, how did you start it? He says, well, for the children, it has to be a game, obviously. They would get bored, and they had no idea about these concepts of communication and channeling. So I said, let's play a game. And I asked them, do you want to talk to the Lord, to the God? He said, yeah. I said, well, let's talk to him. The youngest one was asked to sit as a sort of the first one, and ask God simply, dear God, do you want to speak to us? And he said, you want to speak to us? Let my finger move. So he asked, dear God, do you want to speak to us? And sure enough, little finger just moved. So they started that was how they started. And then eventually, moving of fingers become tiresome because yes or no answers and all that stuff. So they asked, well, couldn't we use a pen? Maybe it'd be easier if we can write, what you're saying to us. And answer came, yeah, you can use the pen. So John was telling me, it was absolutely incredible, the little child, 6 years old, never even went to a school. I remember they were farmers, and John had only 3th grade education. There was no really stress on education in that family. Very simple family, no library of books, maybe cookbook, maybe Bible, for sure checkbook, but that was it probably. And he said the hands would write and we would be talking. So the little guy or a girl would just, and he had his farmer's papers, which he ordered stuff, and so he was used as a blanks. I have some sample of it. But anyway, and they would write over it. And usually the text would be written without any division. We're just continuing writing, and then after they sort of got it, they would have to actually split it into the words by putting lines and all. But point was that the quality of these writings were utterly amazing. And they've been amazed because they said, we never understood what some of these words meant. So we had to write into the dictionary and try to figure out what actually this writing was all about. And sometimes, like I said, one hand would be tuning radio, looking for some station, and other would be just writing. And they were doing that for years, So I met John, and it was still going on. But some of these kids, as they mature and got older, they lost this power, and the communications were not ever possible. But they never, ever told anybody. These writings were so powerful to them and so real that on the advice of these writings, they changed completely their lives. They've been the largest farming family in Iowa. They were pig farmers, and they own over 1 million pigs at certain time. That's a huge business. They had the biggest tractors, the biggest machineries. And because of these communications, because they believe in these communications, the whole family, I spoke to them individually, I interviewed them, I've been friends with those who are still alive, and I monitored that whole thing. They all just changed as a people, spiritually. They sold their farm, they got rid of everything which was material, and they basically live very humble life, working for their living as a sort of employee of some companies and all, but they have totally changed. So that's an evidence of strong belief. If you have a big business, if you have all this cushion life and all, and you let it all go because you believe that what you've been told, is more important than what you have and you live. So I brought some of these writings. I have plenty of them because I studied them and I wanted to compare them with other writings, channelings of other people. And it's only with a flow of time when I look back into it, and I read pretty well any channeling which was ever produced or published, and I met many of these people, they stay on its own. In a sincerity, in a quality, in a varieties of different entities who communicated through them, including the one which call itself your father. And what is important is it's written in a language that children can understand. Even if there are some sections which I would not elaborate too much on, which are very advanced and sophisticated, which probably the adult people would not understand. You know, they are so sophisticated that perhaps only psychologists or people at that level of philosophy would be able to entertain truly some of these ideas. So just I thought I'll read a few of these for you so you can get a taste how the channeling of this unusual group, which nobody ever heard of except me, you know, carried out for years and years in their privacy and communications. Some very interesting opening. I usually sort of try to copy everything and arrange them. But everything here has been sort of written by children. Remember, children between 6 and 12. Just after I'm gone and far away, these shall remind you I have passed this way, you know, which is the opening for me. There are poems. There are all kind of speculations, treaties. But there is one story which was written in the summer of 1967. And it's called Tree. There are parables. You know, usually the best way to convey a certain idea is in an example, in a parable, in a story. And for little children who are being taught by these entities certain moral precepts and righteousness of living and other things, it comes in a parable. This is called Tree. When I was yet a lad, I always wandered along a long forgotten path too many. But I thought it was a wonderful place, and I often wondered who first made this pathway. Well, as I was saying, I often wandered down this path and sat under a large oak tree. One day, as I was strolling down the path, I saw an old woman sitting under the large tree. When I asked her what her name was, she answered, "To you I am no one, only a trespasser, or an old woman. But to the God Lord I am known as Naomi." This was a very strange answer. I wondered if by the God Lord she meant Lord. She meant God. So I asked her, and she smiled and answered, "Yes, my son, this is whom I'm speaking of." I asked her, "From where have you come?" And she answered, "A great distance." Then she said she would tell me the story of a great tree, just as the one she was sitting beneath. And here is the story she told me. Once, when I was just a young girl, at the age of 15, I was walking this same path. On my way home, I heard someone in the distance calling my name. I was so tired of walking, I sat down to rest. But someone kept calling my name over and over again. Naomi, Naomi, Naomi. I wanted to run and hide, but I was so tired, so I sat down. It was coming closer. Then they stopped. Then out of the sky, I saw a great glow. At first, it blinded me, but after a while, I became used to the bright light. "Do you know what it was?" she asked the young lad. "No," he answered, eager for her to tell more. "It was one of the God's Lord's angels. She came to show me the future and give me peace and tranquility. I thanked the angel and set out to help men. But I found out one thing. Some do not want help. They refuse help. But the God Lord understands, for he knew it would be this way. You are not this way, my lad. This I know, for you have listened. I must go now." I helped her to her feet, and as she left, she smiled at me and gave me a golden rose. For a while after she had left, I stood there in astonishment, wondering if it was a dream. But no, it was not a dream, for I still had the golden rose she had given me. I know now that the rose she had given me was the peace and tranquility she had spoken to me about, and now I also had it, to show love to all mankind. Listen, all of God's children, for you have yet to learn how men come and how he will leave. for only the God Lord knows of the future and of the tree. So it was one of the little stories by a little child, you know. And I just sort of marked some of them which are more sophisticated, more... And this is interesting. It's sort of more sophisticated, but again, it came from a very young mind, you know, through the channel. Consciousness is all the inclusiveness of the universe, but to be stated in more exact words, it is the flow of thought in its entirety. Man has endowed himself with the position of a low rate of thought, or in other words, man has concentrated his comprehension of the flow of thoughts to a small segment in order to preserve his own interest in himself. The 2-minute limits to consciousness in objectivity has been so conceived by the soul himself as to bypass the greater volume of thoughts and to narrow the necessary flow of thought to particular organisms, thereby maintaining itself by not being of the great flow. Comprehension thereby seems to be the key to greater objectivity and awareness, but because man has separated himself, he has lost his ability to control concentration. Man has become vulnerable and helpless of his own situation because he has limited his ability to grasp mentally. The hidden objective mind, called the subjective mind, holds many clues to answers man searches for, because through here the great flow operates. Under hypnosis, the subjective mind is bared and concentration on the greater comprehension of the flow of thoughts occurs. The inner mind of man is no different in reality than the outer mind, and in fact are the same mind. What then has drawn man into the position he now holds, and what are the barriers which prevent him from realizing he is one? It is evident that these answers lies before us, because we are still in that position, and the barriers are from this side. The barriers are from this side of the mind, which we call the objective mind, because here is what the initiative lies and concentration originates. It can be presumed that by the continuing concentration on comprehension of thoughts passed around will bring the answers. But for the simple fact that no one has found it yet over these many years, this leads us to the matter of anxiety. Anxiety befuddles the mind, and concentration is momentarily lost, as an examination of history has proven by the rise and declination of higher thinking people. In summation, an example of a man's predicament is to be like the predicament that a bricklayer once found himself in. It seems that this bricklayer, being concerned about no one more than himself, decided to build a house. He made preparation to become a recluse to an infinite degree by veiling himself up in his new home with the necessary provisions. The time finally came when he could enter his own private world and never exit again. He laid the last bricks from the inside, thus enclosing with him his tools by which he had built the house. It was a perfect house for a recluse, for it had no windows or doors by which busy passers-by could interfere with his thoughts about himself. In the confines of the house, all was well for a while, and what little noise he heard from without didn't bother. He had light and all necessities. Being an ingenious chap, he had devised certain candles which could supply not only light, but enough continuous heat. His preparations to become his own world and the anxiety that these brought led him to place the content of his house about in piles. As his first few candles grew short in length, he began to search for the others he had. He had absent-mindedly placed in the piles of necessities, but alas, he could not find them, and the light disappeared from his world. Although he could not find them, he was not overly concerned, being more content with himself, even if he could not see himself. He sat in the dark and was content, but the weathering of the house had caused a series of small cracks to occur, from which light in thin rays and louder sounds of people issued. He began to get cold and bored with himself, the light and sound of his true world evoking memories of companionship and love which he had not recognized before. Then he decided that he was wrong in what he had done, and he knew he must go back to his true home. So he vainly called for help through the small cracks in his walls. No one answered him. Although he could hear voices of persons, they could not hear him, for the barriers he had placed up were almost too good. So men now stand in this same predicament, and he vainly, through the darkness of his own created world, searching for his tool or his light to see them, so that he may return from whence he come, knowing that he was wrong. So as you can see, they are quite an interesting little stories, He got all kinds of poems. This is a very nice one for the children. Once upon a time, it's called Open Your Ears, Eyes and Heart, again, November 23rd, 1967. Once upon a time, a very long time ago, some children set out from home to search for a reason to stay home. They traveled near and far to see if they could be happy somewhere else. They listened to the music of others. They heard the poetry of others. They dreamed the dreams of others. They tasted the food of others. They felt the emotions of others. They said to others, "Are you happy?" But the others did not answer. They said, "Do you love us?" But the others still did not answer. And then they said, "Why do you not answer us?" And the others said, "We do, but you do not hear us. Your ears are deaf to us, your eyes are blind to us, your hearts are closed to us." And the strayed ones asked, "What can we do?" But again the others did not answer. And then suddenly they realized that they must open their ears and eyes, and above all, their hearts. They tried, and through much effort they did open their ears and eyes and hearts. And suddenly they were home again. Home was right there all the time. And their mother and father said to them, "You are finally awakened. Did you have a nightmare?" "No, just a simple dream." "Welcome us home. We love you," said they. See, these are very sort of different type of channelings. And sometimes different entities sign it. That one is called more celebrity, but there's some very interesting one. What are personality differences? And it's quite interesting how the children get it explained. For example, I just read that one, and I might sort of maybe one or two more. That was written in December 16, 1967. What are personality differences? And however, why are there personality differences? Perhaps you have also asked yourself these questions. Perhaps not. But I believe the following information will interest you regardless of the chance that the questions might never have aroused your curiosity therefore. To begin, you all know that Joe is different than Dick, and in turn, Dick is different than Jim, and Jim is different from Harry. The list is as varied as personalities in existence. Why are Joe, Dick, Jim, and Harry different from each other? Because Joe likes peanuts and Harry finds them unbearable, and Dick says they are okay and Jim likes them better than Joe. Or does Joe like them better? Who knows? Probably neither one. But the current question is obviously not who likes peanuts better. The real question is why is Joe different from Dick? And not because one likes peanut butter than the other, but why does one like peanut butter better than the other? Well, let's start with Harry. As we said before, Harry thinks they are unbearable. You are about to find out something about Harry he doesn't even know. To start, Harry is just like the rest of us in the way we overcome, the way everyone is alike. He has a mind divided to two parts, the conscious and the subconscious. Now his subconscious is just like yours, except for a few minor personality differences. Aha, there it is again. But to continue, his subconscious has a so-called memory bank that records everything or every experience just as it happened, and so yours does also. Well, Harry was a child once, just as all of his fellow humans are or will be or have once been. He cannot remember, but he was once very fond of peanuts. In fact, once he ate so many that he became very sick and hoped he would never eat them again. He cannot remember this, but his subconsciousness most definitely can. When he says he hates peanuts, it is just an unconscious reaction, if you know what I mean. So you see, Harry doesn't dislike peanuts, and neither does his subconsciousness. But his subconsciousness, who has a great influence over him, keeps reminding him that he disliked them. So he is different than Joe because Joe never had such an experience. This is why some persons are different than others. See, it's a very different, and this is sort of a very interesting one, and probably the last one I read. That was also December 22nd, 1967, and it's called Emotion One and Only. Love is the first and only emotion. Love is love. So strong is its power. It might feel its way to a heart and take hold so powerfully that it is all of life, and truly it is all of life, all and all. Love and life are the two synonyms of everything in your or anyone else's language. And about language, the language of love is not word, but emotion, a feeling. Form does not matter with love. Love is love. Love is companionship in its purest form. When love has you, you are as if hypnotized. You feel only the good. You see only the good. You speak only the good. And you give only the good. As said before, form does not matter. You can be a woman and love a man. You can be a man and love a woman. You can be a human and love an animal. You can be an animal and love a human. You can be an adult and love a child. You can be a child and love an adult. You can be a child and love a child. You can be a woman and love a woman. You can be a man and love a man. You can be an animal and love an animal. Animals are far closer to desired height of love beings than you can realize. You know that they use not words but convey their feeling of love to you without, as well as some of your own species. Anyone can love music, beauty, nature, to create of his own will, whether it be with brush or pen or thoughts alone. Music is as much part of your life as other individuals, as is the beauty in nature. To create of your own will is how you exist. So if you exist and you know yourself to be you, then you love it so. All these things mentioned are form of love. They are performed differently, but deep inside, the pull you feel towards each is the same. Love is love. Did you ever just wanted to cry and cry and cry for maybe no apparent reason? There is a reason. Love. They perhaps are not the tears of sadness, nor are they tears of joy, nor are they tears of self-pity, nor are they tears for pity for another, but they are just peaceful tears, plain love essence tears. You can laugh to be peaceful and feel as happy as you have ever been and still feeling like crying. Your love tears. You can always laugh. Love, love, love. God is love. You are love. Love is love. From your Father, how I love you all. So you see, this is a sort of essence of these different writings. Some of them are more sophisticated, some of them are in parallel. But remember, just think about when you've been 6 years old and just try to think in this time. Simple guys, not even being in a school, some of them, and if they've been, it was very primitive, very simple. So this again indicates some evidence of communication which does not come from our fellow men, but come from the other side, from entities who might be very ancient. Some of them definitely indicate that. but there are instructions, very specific instructions on how to meditate, very specific instructions how to have out-of-body experience, how to do psychokinesis and stuff like that, with blueprints and drawings coming through the other side. There was an idea which these communicators gave to build a machine. And there was a special name, they call it monoid. You have a humanoid, you have robotoids, and you have monoids, which is a combination of man and machine. And a friend of mine who was instrumental behind these communications, I'll just show you here, is monoid machine, the picture here. I went to see him and we actually tried to communicate using this machine with whatever. And what I can tell you is that that machine had its own heartbeat. You can listen it and you can hear the heart beating through this barrel which had the water inside and resonating. So it was like a man-machine, you know. It was and so this came from these different entities, all kind of other stuff. So it's not only just a philosophy or some sort of a nice saying and instructions, but very specific information. And some of the writings are very specific to the circle, giving advice in all kind of areas, but some of them are extremely philosophical and extremely impressive in its entirety, because like I said, I've seen the kids, I know them as adults, and just that's why I'm researching the things, because there is lots of good stuff around, and that's one of the strong evidence for something higher than what we know in our philosophy, as they say. But I think we are running good on time. We have 15 minutes or so, maybe less, so I'm prepared to answer any questions you have, and if I hope you would ask something so I can satisfy you on it. Otherwise, I would probably continue still more.
What was the name of that book again?
That one, it's called Miracles in the Storm by Mark Macy. And it was published just recently, you know. ...2001.
What was the name of that Winnipeg doctor?
Dr. Glenn Hamilton. And his daughter who wrote this book, his survival effect, was called Margaret Hamilton. Tom Glenn Hamilton. Yeah, very good stuff, very impressive evidence of early research, and still very solid, and as time goes, more and more convincing. Yes?
You talked about the life after death. Is there also any research on out-of-body experience?
Yeah, sure. Monroe Institute, you know, in the United States, you know, specialize in this research in out-of-body experience. They develop a certain technique. They're using, call it hemisync, you know, and you listen to certain tunes, you know, through the headphones, and they would sort of help you to get into the state with certain instructions where you leave your body and pretty well can do, they call it astral travel. You can go actually and visit other places and all. And there's about 7 or 8 books on that topic available. It's a very interesting research, but again, there's a difference between life after death, evidential, and survival, and out-of-body experience. Out-of-body experience is in a present, so you just go out of your spirit, and it's part of the ESP research, you know, part of the so-called paranormal research. But that's some great book, classic is Out-of-Body Experience, you know, by Monroe. And if you want to look more into these areas, you know, there is a bunch of books. One is called Ultimate Time Machine, which came out in 1998, written by Joe McNolan, you know, and He was the first American psychic spy, actually been paid to do psychic spying for 7 years. And he wrote a number of books. That one is excellent because deal with actually out-of-body experiences, training, and he actually married daughter of Monroe who ran that institute, so they're continuing in that area. But he wrote a very great book called Conspiracy Chronicles. Conspiracy Chronicles came out last year. Book, this New Age Books and Crystal, they might still have a copy. You won't put it down when you start reading it, it's incredible stuff.
So in your opinion, how is the best way to prepare for a journey to the other side?
Well, you have to take with you things which are essential, which would be useful on the other side. The knowledge of this world, is not very much of use on the other side, To be a stockbroker, it's fine here, but there are no stocks on the other side, You can be able to win these competition games because you are a smart guy, but again, anything of this world, which we sort of treasure in this world, and has a material connotation, you can buy it, you can hold it in your hands, is very much not of value on the other side. The qualities you have to build within yourself is first a character, You have to live honest life. You have to strive for a perfection within your own understanding. You have to open yourself to these realities first, so your consciousness does not fight against it. You have to accept that, be sort of ready for a transition with full consciousness, because if you are denying these realities, very frequently the fact that you die and you realize you are alive, it stuns you to the point that you might, they say on the other side, you might go to a sleep for a very, very long time and you'll be slowly sort of guided. It's like a nursing, be nursed to that other reality. But the point is, it's the purity of your integrity, of your character. You have to learn to forgive. You have to learn to love everybody, not to have a hate, It's not a very complicated thing. Nobody wants you to be a rocket scientist, just a nice human being with the values, which are true values. And true values are things which cannot be held in your hand, things you cannot buy, you cannot put price on. Love, friendship, helping your brother, as we say, being honest, develop certain inclinations toward things which are good, trying to do things which are sort of self-improving rather than opposite, The very simple things, You would know when you get on this path, in some ways you don't need to have a blueprint. As you are awakening to this new reality of awareness, the instinct which is in you is like that bricklayer. You're starting to see that you get these bricks and lights, divine spiritual awareness would shine, and you would know, you would recognize yourself. It's a transformation of, you see, we are spirit having bodies. That's all. What I'm now, I'm tomorrow. That what is eternal is eternal. Eternal means it never was before or will be after. It just is. And we are eternal. This is a sneeze, 50, 60 years of life. If you look on millions, endlessness. If you look on endlessness, what is it? You can't even define it. We soon forget as we go through our evolution that we ever lived in the bodies. We have so many. We forget now our schoolmates. We forget things which happened 20, 30 years, How you can remember? Spirits sometimes don't know their names, because nobody called them by that name. They are gone. They are on the other side, We forget things, But the point is that we are what we have through our character, not through our knowledge. That's what survives, our personality. Personality is not what we know, but what we are. You have to try to, as we say, your conscience can be suppressed, but it cannot be ever stricken out, Your conscience become naked. When you go on the other side, you judge yourself because of your conscience. You try to, if possible, undo everything wrong. So you have already have judged yourself. You see, according to Swedenborg, which you put it very nicely, there is no such a thing as a heaven and hell on outside. It's all within us. We already are in heaven or in hell. It's the way we feel, the way we live. Body doesn't think. Body doesn't have any feeling. It's the message carried through the nerves to that something. Where that something is gone, you can do anything to body, but body doesn't know it. You know, body is only animated. It's like a car. You put a gas and start it. You know, car is animated and driver drives it. Body is animated and driver is the soul which drives it. Once you know that body gives up on you, you know you are not gone. On the contrary, you are better than ever. If you talk to the spirits, they will tell you that life we're living now, that's truly a death to them, because they truly understand it's a new birth. And it's a transition, everything goes, it's a cycle, endless cycle. Infinite concept of cosmic consciousness strives for knowing itself. And the moment you know yourself, you are already different. And because of it, you want to know something else. So we never know, truly know. And that's our quest forever, eternal quest. We're improving as we go. But you have to understand that earthliness is a dirt on a purity of a soul. It's a spot which has to be polished, and you have to be a shiny. So some people who die and are heavy materialistic, heavily damaged by the philosophies and way of life and whatever, the spirit is very heavy. It's surrounded by all these things, and sort of is on much lower level of evolution and capabilities than somebody who is much lighter. That's why you already separate yourself, you know, it's like a gravity. You have ocean and different things with different densities, and they adjust itself to where they belong based on what is their density. And they never meet until the density is synchronized. So the good people, angelic people, good people, will always be on the same level because of the way of their spirit, the purity of it. And those, so we're judging ourselves here. The company we keep here very likely will be company we're keeping on the other side. So if you want to get to a better company of people, try to be at that level already, spiritual otherwise, and you have it guaranteed. The love of two people is based on the spiritual affinity, not their physical attractions. So if you want to be with somebody forever, try to synchronize yourself so you are alike spiritually. Then you have a guarantee. Otherwise, like I said, some be too heavy and other be too light, and sure I might never meet. Anyway, yes?
From that concept, then, what about the concept of reincarnation?
Yeah, this is the whole thing, you know. There is a whole stuff in that, what I quoted on reincarnation. I would say that we never go back and forth. I feel from what I have studied that reincarnation is evidential now to say, yes, I had to live before because I know the places and I have. The point is that when you are sensitive, you know, you might not know that you have a psychic predispositions. You might be picking up life and experience of somebody who is already there, but that somebody can attach itself to you because he wants to live. Spirits, sometimes when they are at a certain level of existence, they don't understand that they are that. They just don't see it, and so they want to attach themselves to somebody which they can slip into. And this is well documented. Dr. Viklant, he was a medical doctor. He wrote a book called 30 Years Amongst Dead. And this is all about, you know, treating these patients who had these possessions of the spirit, and these people who then basically be overwhelmed, and the spirit think it's that particular person. So I feel reincarnation, evidence for reincarnation comes from the spirits who already lived that life, and therefore they know every detail of it, where they've been recognizing people, and always those who die would recognize you when they speak to you. But they attach themselves into a spirit because they are not aware that they have no body. And then suddenly that sensitive person, usually a younger person, would suddenly speak about evidence of his previous life, which really is not that person's life, but it's the spirit who attached itself and is associated with that person without knowing. But that's how I see some of this evidence for reincarnation. I see nothing else than the penetrations from the other world of a spirit who already died, but managed to attach themselves. If you read a book by Dr. Ritchie, for example, who is a medical doctor, psychiatrist, who underwent death. He died and he was clinically dead when he was a young soldier. And he traveled out of the body. And he described his journey out of the body in this book called, There is Tomorrow, or there's a number of titles for it, or Butterfly or something. You just go Dr. Ritchie, and what was his name? Other Margaret, you don't know first name, given name. Okay, anyway, I'll tell you next time. But Ritchie, if you just go, John in his bookshop, Crystals, he had this book. It's a great book because this guy who was an ordinary soldier, 18 years old, because of his experience, he believed that he continues alive, he saw himself in a spirit. He went, become medical doctor, psychiatrist, and for the rest of his life, he is trying to serve people based on this knowledge here. In his book, he described, as he was flying over some pubs in England or wherever he was, he saw the spirits of people who formerly were alcoholics, But addiction to booze is not the addiction of a body. It's addiction of the spirit. It's the spirit who has the joy and kick out of it, not the body. So when the body is low, that desire to have a drink, it still tortures you. And what the spirits do, they would be in a pubs, hanging around people who are drinking. And if these people are drinking, they weaken their body defense and everything. And the spirit actually associate, meld with their spirit, and that way get drunk by proxy. So they are looking for a way to get high. And this is sort of very similar, that some spirit who wants to live, who have not been aware that he is dead, would look for somebody who is vulnerable and can just, as we say, symbiotically attach itself, and suddenly the child speaks about things he never knew before, but when you verify it, it's all true. So in our understanding, we say, yeah, he had to knew it, he had to live it. We don't realize that there is other option. So it's a long story. I don't want to get back on that, but I could probably do separate lecture one day on this type of stuff, like reincarnations and multiple lives, multiple personalities, and all that stuff. But today we have a minute. Okay, that one, and then you. Okay.
What would be a true test of genuine medium versus someone who's not really?
Yeah, most of the medium today are psychics. There's a big difference between a so-called somebody, like all these television mediums, they are no mediums to me, they are psychics. The true medium is very different, In first, it's the sort of evidential that person would have. It's the state of body it finds itself, the trance, and there are lots of other signs of mediumship. It's a development. Medium does not sort of become medium of the same quality from the word go. It's a sort of a continuing process, There are manifestations associated with the medium which are definitely, clear. The quality of the mediumship is given by certain predispositions, but it also is given by education, because the spirit, when he starts to communicate through the medium, for example, cannot use any other words except the words which that medium has in its consciousness. So if you are limited in your vocabularies and your sort of way of expressing certain things, these communications will be very, very simple and only from the words which that medium has. So as medium improves itself, that's why some of these medium are encouraged to read and to get maximum vocabulary. It's like you get an actor who is led to be in a dressing room and pick up whatever is there. So you can tune yourself into whatever, depending how much clothes you have available. If the cupboard is empty, you have very little room to maneuver. And the same, when you have a medium at the beginning perhaps would be very simple. So the messages coming through would be very rusty, sometimes not as good. But moment, you expand. For example, spiritual writings by M. Oxon, which are one of the classics, clearly show how that medium was developed. He had his predisposition, but no interest at all, but the spirits were able to use him. So eventually they convinced him that it is genuine, he believed it, but they couldn't express lots of views, so they would tell him, we won't appear now for the next 2 years. Please do and study, read books, get yourself more up the level so we can use you. So there is a development of the medium as opposed to sort of psychic. There is a different level of messages being passed, which are very evidential, very specific, relating to the people who are communicating rather than giving advices to the people. Go and buy the stocks or whatever, or I see something. You can hear it by messages. Mediumship also, the guy said, is trance, you know, very frequently medium is totally out of it, you know, doesn't remember a thing when it sort of asks, you know, I don't know, only when it reads back or he played back, the psychic knows, they communicate freely, there is no trance situation. So there are other things. It's not a question of religion at all. You have mediums of all kinds, you know, you can read some of their histories, but very frequently they all at the end start to believe that there might be something more. Many of them, for whatever, would fight against that big way, don't want to accept life after death because they have certain beliefs, you know, and it's only with time sometimes that one of the typical was Marjorie. She was a wife of one of the prominent doctors, and she just became medium by fluke, and she fought it for most of her life, you know, but she was great. Anyway, we can talk about it again more in detail. These are interesting topics, and it will take the whole evening.
I've got so many questions here. When you were talking about you wasn't really sure, or your belief in reincarnation, you think different entities kind of attach yourself so you get the memory.
You know, if you look into the history of the Indian beliefs and Indian religion, you know, there are some very good books on why reincarnation was put forward as one of the options, and it was really a certain controlling mechanism for the higher castes at that time. You know, if you look into it.
I didn't quite finish. The question was, so do you believe that we only have one human experience?
Yes, I believe that we don't come back and forth. We have a journey which is infinite, and a body, we might have had some other bodily experiences. The life in universe is infinite. When you listen to some of the spirits, you will discover that many of them have lived in other, on other planets perhaps, you know, where there is much higher level of consciousness, but they never lived on our earth. But people who live on our earth, they always say that, you know, they might go higher up to the higher sphere when they purify themselves more spiritually. But no, one of them was talking about going back to retrograde, back to the earth, because you don't need to learn any lesson on earth. You have learned, once you get into spirit, there are other schools, other areas where you would grow up and you would realize that it's a very pitiful thing. Like when you speak to spirits, they would say, your word stinks, really, you know, we would never come back even if you pay us, you know, you can really read it. If you look, works Unobstructed Universe, that's one of the classics. It moves you to the tears with evidentials. It's by Stuart Edward White. Unobstructed Universe, Betty books, you know, these are classics, our unseen guests. But honestly, over the years and years of study, the issue of reincarnation has been always something on my mind, because it's a very clear, you know, how important it is. But I have convinced myself, in spite of evidence, and I know Ian Stevenson, the authority on reincarnation, who wrote this book, 20 Cases of Suggestive Reincarnations, 4 volumes, you know, All Souls and all that stuff. I feel that in a concept of cosmic consciousness, you know, there is only one way to go, and that is forward. We do not bounce back and forth between the airs until eventually something happens and we never come back. Once we die, that's over. We evolving further. We might have a body, we would have an etheric body, which is as solid to us on the other side as our body we have today. But even the body is only a habit. At certain point, as you go higher up, you be sort of condensed energy, so to speak. You can conjure yourself to be any shape you want, because consciousness can be housed in anything as long as that consciousness can manifest itself. But like I said, it takes lots of time to talk more in detail. If I had a subject reincarnation, I would show you much more clearly why, how it came about, how this belief in reincarnation started in Hinduism, you know, and how it has been then adopted. You know, the research for reincarnation is not convincing. Evidence for reincarnation is convincing, but as I said, it can be also explained by simple fact that those who already lived come back to the bodies of those who are living and overwhelm them, and people start. It's usually that is the case. You know, lots of people would forget as they grew up that they ever lived. There are books done by medical doctors on Dr. Wambach, who was one of them. She was a lady. She wrote a book, Life Before We Are Born, It's about the children who would be able to recollect their past life up to a certain age. Virtually every child up to a certain age is quite prepared to recollect the life lived before. But then, after the age of 7 and 8, tend to dissipate and it's become rarer and rarer. But the point is that this is the direction I'm trying to point out, that if you are a young spirit, you came from other side, here, you are still open to that communication much more than when you armor yourself with your consciousness and all. It's a long story. Anyway, Neil, how we are on time? 5 minutes past, no? Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry I had such a topic.